So you like to send me articles about relationships.
I do, especially when they're really good, when they're really provocative and kind of answering some real important questions.
Yeah, so the one that you recently sent was in The Guardian. It was by a writer named Stephanie O'Connell, and the title was Single Women Are Buying More Houses. The Men They Are Dating Are Not Responding Well. So I have the article printed up here, and I thought we could talk about it to get your insights to it, why you sent it to me, how you want to unpack all that.
You weren't disappointed in the article, where I always cringe when I think of sending something to somebody and then
I'm more disappointed in that I feel
you were disappointed.
I feel like the disappointment comes from reading the suffering people are in and the traps that people are in, and from working with you for almost 5 years now. It took me a long time of rinse and repeat, kind of hearing the same message over and over again. So when I read articles about relationships, I often apply the stuff I've learned from you, and I could pick out what people are doing that I think could improve their lives, and they wouldn't be stuck in the same traps of relationships.
You know, my brain works the same way, and I end up in the same place, I think, as you, in that I'm just so filled with empathy for that just unfathomable level of pain going through our society, where millions and millions of people are just going through such confusing relationship conundrums, and they don't have the words in their mouth to express themselves and talk about it. And really, that's what motivates me in doing these podcasts. That's why I never think of our audience as subscribers or followers or any of the other words people use. I always think of them as partners, because I know the frustration of trying to help the people in my office, or maybe in a given week, between groups and individual sessions, I can work with perhaps 100 people. But just one of these videos, if it's meaningful to people, it can easily reach tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people. And that gives me such a great feeling to know that people are sharing and they're talking and they're conversing, and they're actually getting more emotionally and relationally adept, more skilled. And that's the only way we're going to turn this world around. It's not going to be one therapist at a time working obscurely in a little office in some small town. That's important work. And I don't feel bad about that work. I feel great about that. But I think we need millions of partners to turn this around. Moms, adults who are in relationships, teenagers who are starting to figure it out. We need everybody to help out with this.
Yeah, totally. So I want to ask you a question coming back to the article.
Sure, sorry.
This will be kind of just straight to the point. Would you, if you were single and a single woman owned a house, how would you respond to that?
For me, I went through some single years following my first marriage ending in divorce, and there were women. I did date women who had houses of their own that they had purchased as single women, and but looking back on it, it was never an event that registered in my mind. It was never a fact of significance. It was, I was glad for them that they had a home. But I didn't date homeless women, and the women who didn't own a home always had decent apartments they were living in. So, for me,
You didn't feel intimidated by a woman who was successful?
No,
More successful than you, that wasn't questioning your masculinity?
Actually, no, and I did date women who were vastly more financially successful than I. And again, it just wasn't relevant to the relationship. It was interesting about her in the same way that, she has brown hair, or she's 5 foot whatever, or in height. But it was a part of reality for sure, and I took note of that. But it wasn't really significant at all, to be honest with you. In fact, I got a little story for you. After reading that article from The Guardian myself, I made a point of asking the men in the different groups I work with.
This question?
Yeah, this very question, like,
Okay.
would that bother you? And the men who are seeking therapy with me were a little confused in that they reacted, I guess, like I would. They just said, why would I be uncomfortable with that? What's wrong with that? In fact, there were a couple of guys in particular who are now married whose wives are very successful, much, and have always been more successful financially than they. And they not only was it not a negative fact of life, it was truly a positive fact of life, because it meant a certain level of freedom for everybody in the family, to be financially free enough that you don't have to worry about getting your next job, perhaps. And instead, you can wait for the right job. And there were other examples that they brought up, maybe even taking a lower paying job because it's actually more you, and it's what you want to do with your life, like being a teacher instead of, say, a construction worker. Even though it pays a lot less, these guys felt like they had that freedom to just be themselves. And I think that goes to the heart of it. I think these guys really felt like the women they were with enjoyed them for the pleasure of their company. It never occurred to them that crazy double pincer that some women get into, where on the one hand they're called, as in the article they mentioned, women being pressured not to be gold diggers, but at the same time, on the other hand, being criticized for not really being into a committed relationship because they had purchased a residence before ever meeting the man they're currently dating.
Yeah, it said waiting on a spouse in order to achieve their life goals.
Yeah, I liked the idea that these women, and of course, it's not about the actual buying of a residence, but that's an example, I think, of a woman going forward with her life goals. Whether those life goals include buying a house or not is not the issue. It's just that, oh, she has a life of her own. She's developing a life worth living. And that usually goes along with, at least if you're with the right partner, you now have a life worth sharing. The same advice I give my male clients.
Okay, well, let me do a few. There's a lot there. First off, do you think that these guys would have reacted the same way were they not in group with you and you giving them ideas that it's okay to have a woman who makes more money than you?
Because I'm circulating these subversive ideas in our society.
You're weakening the men. You're destroying masculinity with your feminist champion.
Okay, so everybody watching this needs to understand the in-joke there, because on our last podcast we posted, it was as if Andrew Tate had misdirected some followers and their bus got off at the soundstage for our podcast instead of some manosphere podcast. So they're watching me, and one guy said, "Oh God, this is horrible," and another guy responded with something like, "That's right." And the bald guy, which I think is me, I'm not totally bald. I have eyebrows. The bald guy is a total feminist champion. And I read that and I thought, I kind of like that. And it's sort of perfect, isn't it, in life, when people try to insult you and give you this compliment they never meant to give you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been playing around in my head, and I actually do. I have to confess, I have some Champion brand sweatshirts, and I have this fantasy of getting a sweatshirt that says feminist with the Champion logo in big, huge type down below it. But I am a feminist. I feel strongly that we're lost without equality. And I've never heard of a woman getting mad at a man because he bought a house before he ever knew her.
Mhm.
I've never heard that story. It's as if she's supposed to be waiting on the sidelines of life, waiting for a man to take her hand before she gets to do anything, before she gets to dance. She can't dance on her own. She's got to be led by the man into the dance of life. And I just think,
But that is the story that's in the collective consciousness in a lot of people.
okay, now I'm getting nauseous. I suppose you're right. That's got to be true, but it's such a dark myth because it robs women of their agency, and it robs us men of the opportunity to have powerful women as partners. What, we always have to find some woman who's just passive and dependent, and not that I'm a hater of passive dependent women. I'm not.
Yeah, watch what you say.
But in terms of partnership, I want somebody, and I think most guys, when asked, when they think about it, they want a woman who can have their back. They want a strong partner because the two of us are going to be combining our resources in order to face life's challenges together, solving life's problems, and by working together, overcoming those problems to go forward, having a great life. And having a woman who's really capable of taking care of herself, I mean, that's the hallmark of what we call an adult.
Is that a threat, though?
Yeah, I think, okay, so we're talking about men and why are they so freaking angry? And I do think they're a lot of men. In fact, didn't they quote that in the article? They said something like 33% of men believe women should always obey their husbands.
I'd have to, here we go. Men's stress levels rise when wives earn more than 40% of household income. That was in Dr. Joanna Sidra, an economist, whose 2019 paper found that.
Yeah, there was another stat somewhere in the article about the men who think a woman should always obey, which means, oh, he believes, and this is where we get into men's heads, right? Those men believe that they are 100% of the time right, which I have yet to meet the man. Never have I met the man who could look me in the eye and say, that's right. I've been right every single time throughout my entire life. And instead, I'm arguing, wouldn't it be great to have somebody who really loved you, who was your partner, who had the courage to stand up to you and to say, I just don't think that's right. I think you're missing something. Who had the courage to do that and the savoir-faire to do it in a way that wasn't abusive, like you stupid idiot or you moron or yelling and screaming, but just to talk it over, like two partners in life. I think it would be amazing. And so for these guys, I think their belief system left unchecked and unchallenged hurts them a lot. And of course, their whole family.
Yeah.
It hurts the whole family they're with. So in therapy, I can help them. But
are you spinning this tale with the men in your group and telling them this? Is that why they believe this?
Well, maybe maybe there is a certain bias because the men in my group have been exposed to me for months, and sometimes years.
Yeah.
And so they know that I'm pounding the drum of equality.
Like, do you ever get a new guy who's like, that's bullshit? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, this is ridiculous. Because this is like in San Francisco, I think they're doing this, which blew my mind. It's like, in one of the biggest cities in the country. And
one of the liberal cities.
And they have these opinions, and these women,
who are encountering this. There's a part of me that doesn't get it, but then there's another part of me. This is going to be a little vulnerable on my part. So I just grew up with the idea as a boy that expressing weakness or vulnerability was a big mistake because it would expose me to ridicule from the other boys. And I didn't want to ever experience that. And I think that's almost universal.
Yeah, for sure.
Most boys.
Well, all public schools was like a prison, is how I view them. It's like the teachers are the guards and the prisoners are the students, which, they're kind of our prisoners in a way.
Yeah, they're in a cage with a fence around them.
Yeah, you can't leave the property, but all the stuff that goes on within the student body, none of the teachers seem to know about. I mean, very rarely, but there's like fights and just like what happened. That's been my experience. So,
Yeah, that sounds like prison, actually.
so in a way,
So
if
like,
you are vulnerable, then you get hurt or you get susceptible to bullies or people who want to take advantage of you or whatever.
also true though in Lord of the Flies, right?
Hmm.
Where there's no adults around at all, and there are no boys who are saying, "Well, gee, I'm really uncomfortable with that." And I think it'd be better if we could all express our feelings here.
Hmm.
There's no Stephen Ing therapist figure on the island. So, so I grew up with that irrational belief, right? And because that might have gotten me successfully through grade school and even high school, but
Hmm.
it didn't really contribute to a healthy relationship dynamic with a partner.
Hmm.
Because my partner, whoever that is in life, is, I think anyone's partner, if they're a true partner, they need to know how you're feeling. And if you're feeling a certain way that's very uncomfortable, that means you're not going to be able to be happy. And happiness is a metric that we use to judge the success of the relationship. And I think that's, if who would ever get married under the belief, oh, I'll marry this person and then we can be consistently unhappy the rest of my life. Nobody wants that. We want to be happy. That we wouldn't get married if we believed it was going to be the opposite. So we grow up with this irrational belief,
Which many men have, and it's a root, and then they go into adults, and then they can't express their feelings, and this is
right? And that makes it, kind of tough to have an emotionally intimate relationship when the other half isn't sharing feelings or feels so ashamed of their feelings. They're prey to be mocked even by their own partner who may not know better, who may share those irrational beliefs.
yeah.
But in any case, so the idea that we learn to be angry instead of accessing those other feelings that make us look more vulnerable, that make us look weaker. And, I think a great mom and dad would educate their children in a kind of a deeper, richer understanding of masculinity and what manhood is all about. A real man can acknowledge the truth about his feelings and look his feelings square in the eye and own those feelings without apologizing to anybody for his feelings. That sounds suitably combative. And I think most young boys could go, yeah, that does sound right. That feels good. But we don't say that most of the time, unfortunately. Maybe we'll change a few minds today with this podcast. But with with my need to not look weak, I can't talk about anything except my anger. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of the men who are angry with those women who never knew us, but had the audacity to go ahead and buy a residence before meeting us. And his response is anger. Oh, I guess you're not really interested in a committed relationship, I think is what one man was quoted as saying. And he started turning the cold shoulder treatment on, and he started treating her in a more punishing way from then on. And I think it's because of another irrational belief. And I hope people are listening, because this one is pivotal to millions of men around the world. That for so many of us men, we really don't think that we could ever be loved for the simple pleasure of our company, or just being who we are, for our humor, for our insight into certain situations, for the other facts about our being. We always feel like we have to earn love,
But
because we're not worthy of love, so I got to work for it. And if she's so freaking successful, she can buy a house without me, how am I supposed to earn it there? I just can't. I'm out of a job.
yeah.
Except those women never, ever would love me just for my attempts to earn love. They just already are capable of loving men for the pleasure of their company, the same way they love their girlfriends, only hopefully in a romantic, a sexual manner.
So you're kind of almost saying that it's better to date a woman who owns a residence because she's willing to love you as you are. Because I would say for other men would combat that idea, it's like I feel like I was in relationships where I felt like I had to earn it, or I had to prove it, or I had to do something in order to keep the love going.
May I ask you, this is a really personal question.
Yeah.
So you thought that, you felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
Was that entirely just in your head?
No, it was real.
No, but I mean, was it communicated by the women?
Yeah,
Or was
like
it-
I don't like you being a writer, or you,
Oh,
you know, you're not doing this, or this person. How else can I say it? Just like I feel like it was communicated in ways that were, you know, writing for sure, disapproving of like who I was and wanting to change me and wanting me to like become something else. So I feel like for both men and women, it's hard for them to love the person as they are because of whatever their background is, and they're trying to change people.
you know what's crazy about this from all of us, men and women, is that just because I am capable of loving a given individual for who they are, who they really are,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that they're an appropriate partner for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they'd be a great choice, you know, going forward, or that we're compatible. And these are important questions for me to resolve, but I'm still free to love them for who they are, to appreciate them for who they are. And I think whether they own a car or they commute on a bicycle or on the subway or by bus is irrelevant. I think it's about the person. And so the idea that, oh, he'd be a great guy to marry if only he had a better paying job. And then begins the pressure, the nagging, the helpful suggestions, the encouragement, the, you know, all the other signs of manipulation where they're trying to change your thinking and get you on the career track they want you on. And I'm saying, yeah, men do that too with women, you know, and apparently that's true also with this discussion of women having the audacity to buy their own housing. And I think it's really all kind of crazy because we can just love people where they are. And then the question is, well, would that person be a good partner for me in a committed relationship? Is a separate issue altogether.
Well, I agree with you, but I feel like it's that the whole thing, like what you're attaining to about loving people where they are, I don't think that's the majority of society are capable of that. I feel like you have to, and I feel like that stems from the lack of sexual education in the context of human relationships that you talk about, because nobody knows how to have relationships in a healthy way. There's no kind of like guidance that we get. So then everyone's experimenting. So men and women are failing to even achieve that. And this article, I believe, is proof of that. But if you go through this Stephen Ing car wash of irrational beliefs, and you start seeing this stuff, then I think you take that step to where you then can start loving people where they are. And then it comes down to the compatibility, like whether or not you're compatible or not. That's
or 10 million people call my office and try to book an appointment. Let me just say, I think we can fix this right now.
But do you agree with that statement?
I do, and it's painful to hear you say it, so I want you to shut up because I can't. It's so painful. It is so painful.
And I believe it's all to be true. It's like, this is the way relationships are. That's why when I read these articles, like I said earlier, I'm just marking down picker, intentional interview, intentional debriefing, like everything we talk about. And I see how all these things can be resolved so simply, but the information about relationships and how to have them is so overwhelmingly, I mean, it's a infinite ocean of people's ideas, which I think that you simplify in an easy way. And I think it is about absorbing that, working through your rational beliefs, and then enjoying that freedom that you get to then be yourself and then to accept someone else as themselves. And then it's a compatibility thing.
Taking your words to heart, I think reminding people that the first goal of dating is to have fun. So we're just there, first of all, to have fun. If we can't even do that, and a lot of individuals partnered up on a date cannot have fun. So it's not like that's a non-issue. That's a real issue. But once we've achieved, the two of us are good enough to have fun together, then we begin to, I think the next stage is I need to begin a process that I call the intentional interview, where I'm interviewing this person for a leading role in my life. And if it turns out that she, or in the case of women, he, if the other person really isn't right for me, to just relax with that that's okay, because it's like an employer meeting somebody who's interviewing for a job and they just don't have the criteria. And I'm not talking about red flagging anybody. I'm just talking about really getting to know people as a human being. And that, because sometimes we're surprised because we are wrong. I have a great example of that from my own personal life. I knew from my former marriage that I was lonely and I wanted someone who could always recreate with me in the great outdoors, which is something I liked. And then I met my current wife, and she confronted me very early on when I talked about backpacking, and reminded me of the fact, it's incontrovertible, that there are no extension cords long enough to get a blow dryer into a national park. And so I thought, I guess we're never. But then she added, but I would be delighted to, be supportive of you going backpacking. And when you come back, I'll be waiting with a hot bath and a glass of champagne, and you can tell me all about it. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound bad. That actually sounds great. And because I don't have to worry about her getting bit by mosquitoes and is she uncomfortable, and oh my God, I hope she likes this. So when we're dating, so much of the time, this is again an important fact, we are working so hard to get the other person to like us that we forget that goal is to find the right partner, not a partner. And to get the right partner, we have to have the attitude of the fisherman who's out in the catch and release mode. And just because I'm on a date with somebody who falls in love with me, or even if I return that love and fall in love with them, but they're incompatible, I still have to let it go.
Yeah.
I just got to let it go. I can't be so needy that I glom onto somebody and I just can't let her go because I'm just so lonesome. And instead, just to enjoy the pleasure of getting to know her. Now, on this business of owning a house, for example, because they're obviously you with your misbegotten career search, the nerve of you becoming a writer and, going to school and all the things.
People didn't like it. Like my one girlfriend, I think I told you before on this, I used to write humor about myself and all my mishaps because
I don't remember you telling me that.
I used to write humor articles about myself, and one of them was about a blow-up doll. And she's like, "You're not putting that out there. I will never be with you. That is embarrassing. I can't have anyone see that." She's like, "If you weren't with me, it's one thing." And we're friends, so it's like, and we've talked about this with her, so I'm not like mad or anything. This was in my 20s. And I remember being like, if that's the case, I can't be with you. And I remember sticking up for myself, so I felt good. But I remember being like, oh, if I write some of this stuff, I may not have a woman who's okay with it.
You're not really free to be yourself then.
Yeah. And then my last girlfriend said that I chose writing over her. That was past my crazy writer phase. That was when I would just be like, hey, I'm going to write for like 2 hours on a Saturday.
You're choosing writing over
that
her.
Was enough to choose writing over somebody else. And to me, I was like,
or to be accused of it at least.
Yeah. And then to take that on, be like, writing's destroying my life. My friends don't like me. Girlfriends obviously are leaving me because of it. And
obviously
it's just like,
it never occurred to you, I'm dating in the wrong gene pool.
It was me I was wrong.
Yeah, that you had the fault and you needed to alter your behavior in order to curry favor with the women you were dating.
Yeah.
And what I would be arguing, and I think anybody listening to this would be reflecting, thinking, no, don't do that. It would be so much more important for you to just reclaim your identity and be who you are than to somehow try to codependently people please your way into a relationship, and then you have to be your fake self for the rest of your life in that relationship, resenting her and being angry with yourself.
Well, that's what I'm doing now, but that's after getting the wash, you know.
Oh.
And I had to rinse and repeat again and again and again, because like we talked about before we started, it's like these concepts that you talk about, like the intentional interview, holding the relationship loosely, taking your time, going slow, just everything, no abuse. It's like it took over and over and over, hearing it again and again and again and again and again. And now I've heard it so much, it's just become a part of my life, and I wouldn't be making the same mistakes that I made in my past. So I'm single. That's what I'm saying.
But you're dating. And
I am now, yeah. But I've been taking kind of a break, but I'm also open to it, and I'm available and meeting people through the activities that I do, and just enjoying whatever I'm open to whatever happening.
And if you're living in Canada listening to this, Jason's phone number will be, for our Canadian audience, put on the screen by the end of the podcast. Yeah. For me, it's getting back to this scenario with the guys. I talked about the fear of vulnerability, and then so our feelings come out as anger. But if women, I'm not ever going to suggest that women take men on as like somehow a mother figure, as if they were a mother figure raising a man boy, into adulthood. But instead, just on a date, to realize he is really angry right now, and anger is always a secondary emotion. So that means he's really afraid of something right now. And if a woman can remember that the angry guy they're dating is really the one who's giving them the cold shoulder, who's kind of saying these cutting little remarks, that he's really afraid, then they get to ask questions that are related to that, which would also be giving permission. So like, I wouldn't say, well, what has you so terrified about my buying a house? That would be an intimidating question. Instead, I would suggest to say, I can see you're really uncomfortable with the fact that I already bought a house before I ever met you. What's going on with that?
Well, they say it's, they view it as you trying to emasculate them. So they're afraid.
Before you ever met them.
Emasculated.
Yeah, you emasculated him because you bought a house before you ever started dating him.
But that then too, the definition of masculinity then means that you have to, that's the patriarchy then, as they say, where the men are in the power. So if the woman has more power than you, then you're emasculated, right?
Well, I'm really trying to understand the argument there, and I don't mean to be thick-headed. I'm usually pretty good.
Well, I mean, it's just like, if you are, the anger is coming out of the fear of being emasculated.
That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying.
Because see, my manhood depends on my taking care of her.
Okay.
And if I can no longer take care of her because she's so strong and independent, if I can't even open tight jars for her, if I'm not allowed to parallel park for her, what kind of man shall I be?
What would a man be though? Like, what? Say I'm the man. What am I supposed to do then? If I can't support her, provide for her, open jars for her.
Yeah,
What am I supposed to do?
That critical line was 40%. If she makes more than 40% of the household income, then oh my God, my
whole identity,
my genitals are melting in my pants.
That's what it feels like.
Yes,
to me.
To you?
I'm doing a role play.
Okay.
But it's like, what? No, to me, I don't care. But a man like that's where he's going with it, right? Like,
if they're saying that, I guess that you have to take them at face value. But I think for me as a man, I would say, wow, so your manhood is on a sliding scale. And if you shake hands with a woman who's a millionaire, then you're a eunuch. you have to be dating at the bottom of the dating pool, finding the most abject, failed human beings possible so that you can feel large and in charge, which is crazy. No parent I know at least, would say to their son, be sure you get some woman who can't take care of herself.
So but the guys then who then do this, then they take the hero role by, like you had the savior complex of having to save. I could save her, I could provide for her. So men in this position who are deciding, I don't want to date this woman because she owns a house. I'm going to date someone who doesn't own a house and isn't as successful. So that's where they're going with it. And like, why would you want to do that as a man? Because you're intimidated by a woman who's independent and strong financially.
I'm so much older than you. I can remember a time when men were shocked and intimidated by the idea of a woman having a career that was lucrative and financially compensating her in a way that was above and beyond most.
Well, that's how it was. That's the whole thing. As they say, the patriarchy is the men are in power. They want to keep the women down. And now that the women are rising up and the argument is the women are rising up, they're having jobs, they're having more college success, and now they don't need men. And then now men, that again leads to anger, which leads to fear, which means that they're not going to have the love that they want to have because the women are above them, so they'll never get it.
Yeah, I don't think that, for me, when women use the term patriarchy, or when some feminists use the term patriarchy, they're talking about a power structure that does not include all men. For example, I went through Vietnam, and I know you're not old enough to have gone through that. So going through, and when I say I went through it, I don't mean fighting. I never got drafted, but I was always living under the shadow of getting drafted.
Yeah.
And as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old coming of age, where 19 would be the age I'd be eligible, it was really living under a lot of fear because I didn't want to go off to Asia and fight people I never had anything against. Mm-hmm. And there were most American boys my age were feeling the same way, that this was scary and it was something to be avoided. But the so-called patriarchy is viewed as monolithic. So if he's male, he's part of the patriarchy. And no, it's really not like that, because going into a battle zone and having your limbs blown off doesn't feel very powerful for the men involved. Yeah. And there are plenty of men who live, at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, and talking about the patriarchy they don't feel particularly empowered because they have external genitalia. Yeah. So, and then and it goes on and on and on. The guy who's on a date trying to get this woman to love him, trying to prove that he's worthy, that doesn't feel particularly powerful. So when we talk about the patriarchy, I think it's a thing to talk about, but it doesn't really explain interpersonal relationships, because women don't date a demographic. Women date individuals, one by one by one.
But do you think, again, I would say the individual...
He's not a representative of the patriarchy.
Well, I feel like the individual is almost like an extinct creature then we get into. I would say the individual, I feel like a lot of this stuff, again, going back to the article, it's a society sort of collective consciousness, sort of ideas on relationships that people get sucked into, and then they glam onto, they attach to these ideas and they form their identity based around them without even becoming the individual. But I feel like to get to the higher state that you're talking about through relationships, you need to actually first know what it means to become an individual.
Well, and it is, I don't want to skirt the idea of what is a man and how do boys become men. I think that's worthy of a whole podcast or a whole book in itself, because men, I think, are uniquely social, in that women have biological markers of their femininity, that we throw the baby up in the air when they're born and we say, it's a boy or it's a girl. And okay, but they're not men and women yet. And then for women, there's this really clear process that women historically have gone through from the beginning of time, where they they have these biological markers that they are truly women, whether they are gay or straight, whether they are tall or short, physically powerful or physically weak. Women don't insult each other by saying you're no woman at all. They emit, whereas men do. And for us men, it's pretty obvious that it's far more social or sociological, this idea. And it isn't the women who anoint me with my masculinity. It's not that having sex with my first sexual partner doesn't make me a man. It's, I could be a man and be celibate my whole life. I could be a man and be gay. I could be a man and, a real man that worthy of the respect of the circle of men. And that is what it finally comes down to is, do the men respect you? Have you found your place in a circle of men who you admire, the kind of men who help you become a better man? And this is again where my manosphere fans, which number none, I think my manosphere fans would argue that they have found their place amongst the men. It's just all of the man boys of the manosphere who rank their masculinity by how many women they have sex with regularly and how much money they're earning. Well, that's not the heart and soul of masculinity. I'm sorry, that just doesn't work. That doesn't mean they don't have the respect of real men. They don't have the respect of real women. That's something boys would come up with.
So they're like playing in a world that's just not even adult?
Well, their world is about exploitation. Mm-hmm. They have taken their superior strength and their ability to focus, their willingness to become sociopathic and prey upon others who are weaker and more vulnerable to take their money or to get sex, meaningless sexual connections. And whereas the rest of the world is begging for men to become heroes, the kind of men who take their superior strengths and abilities and use that to help those who are more vulnerable than themselves. So men who are protecting their children, men who are not only protecting their children, but the children of others. And that's why when I was growing up, policemen, and I know it's very with ICE agents walking around in masks now, this is very contaminated. But back when I was a boy, it was actually very credible to think of police as being heroes in the community because they were risking their own health and safety to try to protect all of the children of the community. That was the perception. That was the message, at least. And it's the same way with all first responders. And frankly, it's that way, I think, with all real men. Real men who we admire, who are heroic, are not out there trying to figure out how to exploit people. Mm-hmm. They're out there trying to figure out a way to help people. So, if women are dating exploiters, yeah, they need to have a think, because those would be the guys in the patriarchy. The patriarchy is about power and control mm-hmm. and domination over others. Yeah. But most men are not about the patriarchy.
But this article, though, would you say that none of these men are real men then?
The men that they're describing, they're not. And they're man boys who have not grown up yet. I'm sorry, they haven't grown up yet, because how much money she makes is irrelevant to who I am as a man. Mm-hmm. If let's say my neighbor is a woman, whether I'm living in an apartment or I'm living in a neighborhood with housing, with stand-up individual houses, her income is not a reference to my masculinity.
Well, I'm thinking too, like if I was a guy who was firm on that, and I would just be like, yes, it is, yes, it is, yes, it is. But then I'd be like, hold on a second. I could be living in like a cool house or a cool condo that she owns, because they also mentioned here, then they don't want her to be the landlord. And they feel like that's another power play, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But to me,
it sounds like a rom-com in the making.
This could be a movie, yeah.
Yeah, the landlord turns out to be this woman I find very attractive and one thing leads to another, and before you know it, we're falling in love. And
you have no genitalia because you cut it off because you lost all your masculinity.
you know,
it would be called feminist champion.
I guess there's probably a term I can't remember right now for the male version of a gold digger. Some guy who hunts down women to exploit them for their money.
Oh yeah.
But most of the men, the vast overwhelming majority of men, admit to me they would never marry a woman they thought was the wrong woman just for money. You know, that if I didn't find her physically attractive, if I wasn't in love with her, you know, if I didn't have this, if I didn't have that, they would really be unmotivated by the finances in that situation. But I think for the woman, again, and for the man to realize I'm angry, he's angry, or I'm angry because I'm really afraid. And my fear, if I'm a real man, is something I need to confront. It's something I have a duty and an obligation as a man to face, because I can't have self-respect while at the same time knowing that I'm driven by my fears and controlled by my fears.
But do they see it that way?
Not until they watch this.
No. Let me mention. So one thing that they did mention, they said that the response wasn't universal, unlikely that men all are like this. And she said, or some in the article, they mentioned some men are quite comfortable with a higher earning or more financially established female partner when this is known from the outset. And I was like, okay, that's a plus. Yeah,
I do think, you know, the article was written because the author had a thought in mind and looked for those women who could provide supporting evidence. But we could have just as easily turned it around to have a whole article about men who are really comfortable with that, and they've learned they've learned that their masculinity is not threatened in the least, and in fact they are free to become more themselves than ever before.
Well, that kind of article is kind of like what I feel like we would put out, but most people don't put that out because that isn't even within the narrative of what relationships are. Again, I feel like the dominating storylines, I feel like, take over history or take over the media.
Well, I can't disagree with you, but I also think it's always been true, right? Since the beginning of newspapers, if it bleeds, it leads. If there's a conflict, we want to report on a conflict. Writing a news article about happy couples being successful sounds incredibly boring.
Well, that's why I have such a problem with the media, as you know, because I sometimes go on rants about media not liking it, but it's like, why are we just retelling these stories all the time, and that are of like this sort of conflict, and just I feel like that keeps us living in it. I would love to read good stories like this that would be, at least for me. I mean,
I'll tell you, I think
I'm different. I like conflict and drama, like in movies and TV and books and plays, and go have fun with all the drama that humans like play out on a day-to-day basis. But in like news and media and education, I feel like it should be educational, which again gets to the root cause of all this, which I think is education. Well, and people claim to be looking for solutions, but I don't think they really are.
Do you really want to know the answer to this question?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to tell you.
Tell me.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a relationship, and I have, where you're thinking to yourself, damn it, if we've had this fight once, we've had it 100 times. Right?
Yes.
And why are we having this fight over and over again? Because we never solved the problem. That couple never solved the problem. Our society keeps rehashing these kinds of news articles because we as a culture have not solved the problem. The gift for amateur anthropologists like you and me is, as we study the culture, we see, oh, there's this big gaping hole in our understanding. As a culture, we don't understand money and the relationship or non-relationship with masculinity, femininity, and future happiness. So there's we need to We need to get this message out there. So that's the gift for you and me. And that's why it is repeated, so often is they're like you and me in those dysfunctional relationships we've had where we really weren't capable of solving problems. And you know how many times I've had those kinds of arguments in my current marriage? Like 0 times. Because
over 32 years.
Yeah, I'm that old.
Well, just to give people a context.
But
I don't know who could say that, to be honest.
Well, over 32 years, yeah, because I'm always, like in sales, how they say ABC, always be closing. I'm always trying to look for the resolution because I've been in that dysfunctional relationship, and it's your pain and yours in the awareness that you have of our news media that is going to really motivate you to not do that damn thing, make the same mistake over and over and over again. And instead, I'm going to work through that fear. I'm going to get on the other side of that fear, and I'm going to be a better man for it. So that, okay, now I can meet women who are up and down the socioeconomic ladder, and it's really kind of irrelevant. What matters more is who she is. And can I enjoy the pleasure of the company of this person? Could I enjoy, beyond just a date, an hour or two here and there in my life, could I enjoy living with such a person? And that's a whole separate discussion. That money is sort of nearly irrelevant.
Yeah.
I want to date adults, and I would want you to date adults. That's a better way to say it because I don't date. But for you to be dating adults who are capable of self-care, and you're not dating grown-up children.
Yeah, I want to meet all the women I date. I want them to be making minimum wage and working retail. And I want to be the big and strong guy who owns a condo. And
so that it will affirm your true masculine role in the relationship. And of course, you don't mean that, and you're saying that facetiously, but I know that there are guys who really so strongly disagree with that. And what's weird in America? We're never above doing this. We do it all the time. We take the most dysfunctional idea we can think of, and then we make it part of our religions. So that, in the so-called conservative church, which isn't truly conservative at all, it's that men are supposed to be having the job outside the home, women are supposed to be at home with the children. That's just complete BS, and using some sort of bastardized spirituality to beat people over the head with this message. Oh, why? Oh, because the pastor is afraid. The preacher is afraid. And they're so rigid in their thinking, they can't realize, oh, you know what? There's about a jillion ways of doing family in this world. We humans are very adaptive. And just because you and your family did it one way doesn't mean all the rest of us have to do it that way. So what we're talking about in this freedom from fear business is freedom. At the end of the day, it's all about freedom, and the freedom to be myself, the freedom to develop a life worth living. And when I've done that, then I have a life worth sharing. So if you as a single guy go through your next 10 years not buying a residence, or you buy one residence after the other and work your way up to some expensive hoity-toity kind of address, great. I'm sure that there will be some demographic of women out there who would be open to dating you, and just as there would be a demographic of women who would never be open to dating you. That's what I experienced, at least. Women by the tens of thousands found me quite resistible most of my life.
Yeah.
But we all get our fair little splinter share of the market.
So these women who do buy houses or condos in cities or wherever they're living, they have created that life worth living, and then now they're having problems finding, they're ready to share. They've created a life worth living, so they have a life worth sharing, but now they're having trouble finding the men to share it with. So to them, I would say it seems like it goes to the impaired picker, and they're impaired picker, and they are picking. It's like they have the life, they're all set up, ready to go relationally. Now it's about who are you choosing to be a partner.
Well, I'm going to go on the record and saying not everybody who owns a house has a life worth living.
Okay.
Right? Because for a lot of people, it's a trap where they're so overwhelmed with making their out of proportion mortgage that they don't have time to have a life.
Got it.
But I can say this about to men and women listening to this. It's true for a lot of us, whether a lot of my male clients are guys who've been to prison for one thing or another. And when they come out of prison, they feel like they're damaged goods. No decent woman's ever going to want to be in my life, et cetera. And they unconsciously aim low for some woman who they perceive as being lower than them on the socioeconomic ladder, because again, I can earn her love and she will be grateful and reward me for taking care of her. She'll reward me with love, even if we're not really compatible. And I think the women who are listening to this, who've already bought their house and have been very disappointed in the men that they're dating, because they're so afraid and they're not able to talk about their fears and work through them. I think those women are probably guilty of the same thing. And I would recommend both groups. The old expression in marksmanship is to raise your sights so that you can start hitting the target. And to raise your sights may mean to become comfortable with the uncomfortable idea of dating people you've never dated before, people who are perhaps more financially successful than you, or people who are different from the people you've been programmed to think should be your demographic.
Yeah, and then you mentioned too before, like once you start doing that, it's almost like these people start disappearing from our lives that we were seeing before, like the men, for instance, who are getting upset about their housing situation. They will kind of like disappear, and then you'll meet a whole nother group of men who are open to the idea.
Oh, yeah. For me,
And
as
that's
a
what it
guy,
seems like for me.
I was always doing the rescuing, the damsel in distress. I don't even see those women anymore.
Yeah.
And I got to that point before I met my current wife, and it was such a relief to see, there's this amazingly highly functioning, emotionally intelligent, and very wonderful group of women out there. And my problem is I love them all. I just think they're all so amazing. And I wish I could abracadabra, some sort of matchmaking service so they could all meet their male counterparts. But I think that's a task best left to our own personal individual journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, at the end of the article too, there's a quote. It says, "Where is the pool of men who are self-sufficient and like to read and are willing to go to therapy and not afraid of a woman who has a passport?" That sounds really wild to say out loud. And then she goes on to say, "But I don't feel like I'm missing a ton by choosing to read a book instead of swiping on Hinge." So to me, at the end of this article, the women are coming to their epiphany moments, and they're knowing what they want. And I feel like what they are wanting is the sort of man that you're describing, or that you're helping shape, or you're brainwashing in your group therapy.
No, I think it's, what I'm trying to do is help the men I know who've never received any help at all. And they're trying to learn how to be men on their own with no guidance whatsoever. And what she articulates, where are the men? I want to know, where are the men who like to read, who are emotionally articulate about their feelings, who are not threatened by these things? Where are those guys? Well, that tells me that there's this amazing, wonderful pool of women out there who are waiting for the men to grow up. They're waiting for the men to show up. Now, there are men like you who I think are quite ready to show up and ready. So, when those Canadian calls start coming in, of course you'll get those. But but it's also true the other way around. So often, because heterosexual women at least date men, and heterosexual men date only women, a lot of us are generalizing about men and women based on the people we've dated. The problem with that scientific experiment is it wasn't very scientific, because there's some real bias. I'm doing all the picking. And if all the women I'm picking are angry at me because I'm a writer and resentful that I choose to write for 2 freaking hours out of a weekend, that's on me. I need to take a look at that.
Yeah.
And the same thing with me in my life. If I can't be comfortably who I am, then I'm dating the wrong group of people. But it's also true that I'm responsible for for targeting that demographic of women I would have dated, as are you. And women have the same responsibility. At the end of it all, there's no escaping responsibility. So we can be mad at men or mad at women, but really at the end of it all, it's the person in the mirror who's making those choices.
Well, that's a wrap. So
this is great.